Hi, as part of the Front Door Project, realizing Robert C. Maynard's vision of fair, accurate media coverage for all, we spent some time interviewing some people in the industry about where have we been in the last 20 years since my father died in terms of the quest to diversify the industry. We talked to people about the challenges, the progress, and where we need to go from here. And I think anyone who's been paying attention to this issue has to realize that the last 20 years have been fraught with challenges. In fact, when the traditional business model imploded, as one media executive said to me, not only was diversity no longer on the front burner, it wasn't even in the kitchen. And yet, despite that, some people said that they did see in this transforming landscape that there had been glimmers of progress and some opportunities. That's what we're going to focus on this week. Some of the challenges and some of the progress and opportunities that people have seen. Next week, we'll hear from people talking about where we need to go from here so that we really can finally realize my father's vision of just media coverage for all.
So I actually started my career just a little over 20 years ago, so I've had a chance to really sort of survey a wide range of what's happened. I actually owe some of the programs that were in existence at the time to what's happened in my career. For example, the Dow Jones Newspaper Fund, the New York Times Scholars Fund, both of those were instrumental in fostering my interest in journalism and in providing the support to help me get an early start in this career. As I've gone through my career, there have been other opportunities that have emerged. I mean, one of the most significant ones, I think, was my participation in the Maynard Fellows Program at Harvard University. That program really opened my eyes to the entrepreneurial activities that are taking place in the media landscape and how I can be a leader and help to foster that attitude among not just people who are coming up, but among the current generation of people who haven't had some of the same opportunities that I had.
Well, while a lot of people were lamenting at the downturn of the industry, in fact, the disruption of the industry has been great for people like myself, because I'm not following the traditional path of journalism where I'm able to leverage my understanding of technology and new media to really be able to rise up to leadership level. And I think it's really important for all the different diverse journalists to think about their path. And there is no traditional path anymore, and you could really kind of make your path your own story. And we definitely need to be a little bit more strategic about it, but at the same time, it's important to know that the old way of success and leadership does not exist and is yet to be determined, and it's up to you to decide the course of action, and it has served me well, and that will be my advice for all other journalists.
So yeah, I mean, in terms of things that have happened in the past, time that I've been in journalism, which is about 15 years, I would say that the biggest positive trend that I see is a lot of the newer news organizations, new media companies like Gawker and BuzzFeed and XO Jane are really doing a good job of hiring and promoting platforms of people of color journalists, in particular African American journalists. Like some of the journalists that work for those organizations have really been able to build large platforms and get a lot of engagement, and I think that's really great. And that's not something that you would really have seen in the past. It just seems like something that wasn't, those opportunities really weren't there for African American journalists, 10 years ago.
Diversity, I'm going to talk about diversity in particular. Diversity was something that we knew we need to work on from an industry perspective, and we've been talking about it 20 years hence. While we've made some progress, there's still a lot more work to be done from the management ranks to the rank and file to those who are in the tech the tech industry where a lot of our growth is. We hear that oftentimes when it comes to women and people of color, we're not represented. And that's something that I would think for 20 years moving forward, we need to continue to figure out how to include more of us in that discussion, whether it's from entrepreneurship, and getting more women and people of color to become entrepreneurs, figuring out how we can include their voices in the discussion around technology and innovation. Advances need to be made in that area in particular, as we know, as we move forward with this digital revolution.
Well, I think there's been really 3 key changes in the way that media has changed in the last 20 years, and I think it's kind of predicated on how the audience has really driven a lot of that conversation. One is in the community itself. I think the communities that are engaging with storytelling is obviously huge because of the tools that are available to be involved in the conversation. So journalists can no longer have the kind of like from the rooftop authoritarian voice. They can still add an expertise and definitely a really pivotal role, I think, in discerning what's important and explaining why it's important. But audiences are involved, and they want to be involved, and they want to make sure their voices are heard. And they're also really concerned about the transparency, which I think is the third change, in how the news is being told and the way it's being told and who is telling the stories.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say that that Robert Maynard has been an example and an inspiration for all of us who are in journalism education. I would say that I have been inspired by the Institute for Journalism Education as sort of a model to look when I came to this country from Brazil to teach journalism, to look into Latin America and see what I could do from here to help journalists in Latin America with journalism training, and I think the work he has done and that has been continued so well is an inspiration for people like me, and because of that I created the Knight Center for Journalism in the Americas that has been offering training and education in journalism for thousands of journalists in all countries in the region. So I think it's a good example and a very successful one.
Well, first of all, I wanted to say that I wish we had 1,000 more Robert Maynards to carry the struggle forward. Many of us are trying to follow in his footsteps. I think the time is even more critical now for the issue of diversity in news media. I see an incredible divide between communities of color, digitally, that is, a digital divide, and the media is just way out there now, technologically, but our people in our communities are not. So I think the struggle is even more serious for us right now. And if you look at in a larger scope as well, not just the lack of diversity in news media and all of this new wonderful technological world of journalism that's happening, it's wonderful, but where are the voices saying, where are the people of color? Why aren't they part of this pioneering new generation of journalists who are really breaking the digital divide?
Well, I think the most significant thing is Bob's statement that we'll never be the country we can be until all Americans have front door access to the truth. They don't. So whether, some do and some don't, and those percentages and how they're changing, we can try to make a good calculation of that, but at the end of the day, we still have gigantic digital divides having to do with income levels, having to do with education, having to do with seniors versus the rest of the population, having to do with the rural population. So the digital divides fall across fault lines, just as Bob predicted, because they're part of the society that is creating them.
I think in terms of how the media diversity has changed, there's been much progress there. Obviously, you still have some improvements to make. Just take, for example, we're here at the Online News Association conference. This conference, even 5 years ago, probably was 80+% white, and over the past few years, there was initiatives to really diversify the conference, and now we're proud to report that over 50% of our speakers are persons of color or women, and included of diversity with that in there. So even you look at this conference, we're proud of the progress that's been made in terms of diversity, particularly in the digital world. We still have more to go in terms of the leadership level. I think now one of the key areas for the next step for that movement is getting people of color in the executive ranks so that they can make an impact in terms of the decisions made in the media every day.
One of the things that I sadly came to grips with as a journalist was our goal to give voice to the voiceless. And what is sad about it is that we as mainstream media didn't do that. What's good about technology is giving voice to the voiceless. And what I think what needs to happen is to continue innovation from people of color. We're not waiting for mainstream to tell our stories. We're telling our own stories. And as we do that, one of the things that's very much of the web, and I think is very much of Maynard Institute and this philosophy, is being collaborators, not competitors. I preach something called horizontal loyalty, which was coined by Robert Krulwich a couple years back during a speech he gave. And I want you to succeed, I'm going to succeed, we're going to succeed together and make this a better place, right? So with that kind of philosophy, we can't just sit down and complain, we got to do something. And now we have these digital tools that enable us, empower us to do something. And now that we're all trying this out together, we're going to be stronger when we help each other out and stand together.
I think we've been more successful in raising awareness of diversity than we have of achieving the diversity in our newsrooms that reflects the diversity of our communities. I think that that certainly as newspaper newsrooms have contracted, that we've lost some of the progress that I think we had made in diversifying newsrooms, and it's still important to us to broaden our audiences. And I think if our newsrooms reflect the community better, we're going to have more success at broadening our audiences. So that's a matter of great concern to me and to my company, Digital First Media.
Oh, I agree, Dori, that there have been successes, but there also have been many, many challenges, and indeed there's probably been some retrenchment in many circles. One of the beauties of social media is that you can get your message out very quickly to the masses. One of the challenges is the decline in terms of traditional media jobs. I'm hopeful and optimistic because there are so many opportunities in the digital landscape.
Well, I have to say, as somebody who grew up reading your father's newspaper, and I realized by reading the Oakland Tribune that black people could do journalism. So that was an inspiration to me, and I think that your father kind of set up a whole generation, my generation, to go into the newspaper business. And I think that times were good. But it's very interesting when economics come into play and there's a recession or a downturn, the first ones let go are people. And I think that your father would be distressed at how far we've kind of fallen back because of economics, not because we don't have the talent, the ability, the gifts.
When asked about success, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is we're still here. You know, in spite of systems that are clearly not designed for African Americans in particular, it's really amazing that given the recession, given the downsizing, the layoffs, et cetera, you still have a committed group of black journalists who want to tell our stories, who want to tell stories, period. So I think that's a big, big success. When you talk about the failures, I think that we lost sight of a really good, principled goal. Many of us started to look for money as opposed to the morals and the values and the worth. the causes that the enslaved Africans fought for, the causes that were fought for during the civil rights movement, really got lost when we started going more and more in larger numbers into integrated papers and into mainstream papers. So I think that's a failure, but it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity in that we can resurrect the black press, because when you think way back to 1827, when Cornish and Russ Worm started the very first paper, Freedom's Journal, and the cause was enslaved Africans, abolitionism. So they had to tell those stories. And so we've got to go back to value and tell the stories that are our own and that promote the good in our communities, not in a selfish or standoffish way, but in a very intentional way.